He ended his mom's life for not letting him get Avril Lavigne tickets. 39-year-old Robert Lyons lived with his mom in Carroll Stream, Illinois. He was described as a troubled individual who struggled with mental health issues for many years. Robert also had a history of erratic behavior and had been in and out of treatment facilities. His relationship with his mother was strained, but his mother, Linda, was a caring and loving parent trying her best to help Robert manage his issues. On March 14th of 2008, Robert told his mom to call one of her friends to get him tickets and a skybox to see Avril Lavigne in concert. Linda told him no, and when he heard her say no, he became enraged. This started an argument between the two, and in a fit of rage, Robert grabbed a champagne bottle and struck his mom twice in the head. But this wasn't enough for him. He then stabbed his mom 9 times in the back. Robert used so much force that one knife blade broke off inside of her and the other one bent. After attacking his mom, he poured harsh household chemicals like Drano, Tile X all over her body. Robert then changed his clothes, left his mom's lifeless body on the floor, and left to go shopping. Neighbors and friends were concerned once they hadn't heard from Linda, so they called police so that they could go and check on her. Once police arrived and went inside of her home, they found Linda's lifeless body on the bathroom floor. Police immediately focused on Robert since he lived with his mom and he was nowhere to be found. Just hours later, Robert was arrested at a Hooters restaurant, calmly enjoying his food. In September of 2011, trial finally began for Robert, and the jury deliberated for less than 2 hours, and he was convicted of first-degree murder. In January of 2012, when Robert was in court, he confessed to everything and stated that he wasn't taking his medication, and during the time he was suffering from a manic episode. Ultimately, Robert was sentenced to 40 years in prison.
A woman in Australia has just been sentenced after she set fire to a man who made a misogynistic comment towards her. Corby Walpole and Jake Lauder had been friends for around about 9 years. On the 7th of January last year, the two attended a house party together in New South Wales. They had spent around about 12 hours drinking, having between 23 to 25 drinks, alongside being under the influence of cocaine. Like long-time friends do, the two had been teasing each other throughout the night. However, Jake took it one step too far, being misogynistic towards Corby, saying, quote, "She should stay in the kitchen making scones if she couldn't keep up drinking like the men were." In a rage, Corby went to the garage where she picked up a gallon of petrol and proceeded to douse Jake in it. She held a lighter up in front of him, warning him what she was about to do. Probably not believing that she was going to do it, he told her, quote, "Go on, do it," to which she did. She touched him with the lighter and ignited his body. Upon being ignited, Jake screamed and other friends tried to put him out by hitting him with a dog bed before eventually throwing him into the pool. Jake would sustain 55% burns across his entire body. He had to be placed in a medically induced coma for around about 8 days. He underwent 10 operations and spent at least 74 days within a burns unit of a hospital. He did survive the attack, however his burns are so severe that he cannot go outside and be in the sun. In court, Corby has said, quote, "To this day I feel horrible, remorseful, guilty for what I have done to Jake. Not only Jake, but his family, his loved ones, his mutual friends. Anyone who has been impacted in this entire case. I find it very hard to believe the injuries that were caused from my doing. I would do anything to go back in time." Corby Jane Walpole has just been sentenced to 7.5 years in prison for the attack on Jake. She will be eligible for parole in 2029.
She ended her son's life at a practice range because she believed it would send him to heaven. 44-year-old Marie Moore lived in Florida with her 2 sons, including 20-year-old Mitchell. For years, she had suffered with severe mental health issues and had even been hospitalized after attempts of trying to harm herself. Despite her challenges, she tried to maintain a good relationship with her sons. In April of 2009, Marie took Mitchell to a local practice range, and at first it seemed like a normal outing. But all of a sudden, Marie shot her son from behind, ending his life instantly. She then turned the gun on herself and ended her life as well. Investigators later found notes and recordings where Marie claimed that she was the Antichrist and she was acting under voices and disturbing beliefs. Mitchell's father filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the range, claiming that they knew about Marie's past that even let her rent a firearm even though she had been banned before. This tragedy left a son without his mother or brother and a family wanting answers that they may never get.
I just can't imagine a fire breaking out by accident and your reaction is, okay, lock them all inside. It was the 1st of August 2004 in Paraguay. Equa Bolaños supermarket was heaving with people. It was a really busy Sunday. Now the shop was huge, and as well as being like a traditional supermarket, there was also a food court inside. There was also a massive parking garage underneath as well. But the kitchen of the food court was not properly ventilated. There weren't any working sprinklers, and I've also heard word that the smoke detectors weren't actually turned on because they were deemed to be annoying. The chimney in the kitchen was designed in a really weird way. It was like at a right angle, so it was really difficult to clean, and honestly, none of them could be bothered. Over time, fat had collected in that chimney and was super flammable. Now on that day a fire started, and actually it was pretty small to begin with, but because there were no smoke detectors it just grew and grew and grew. It was going on for 2 hours before anyone even noticed. It grew so hot that grease started leaking from a duct inside and just caused this huge gas explosion. Obviously there was just sheer panic and terror as people started trying to run out of this burning building. But in one of the most evil and absolutely senseless acts I've ever heard, the owners ordered everybody to be locked inside. This was Juan Piva and his son Victor. Now, they were more concerned with stopping people from leaving the restaurant without paying than saving the lives of these people. I mean, I don't know what they thought was going to happen. These people cannot pay you if they are dead. So after being intentionally locked inside, people were being burnt alive. Men, women and children were pouring at the windows, trying desperately to be let out, but toxic fumes were suffocating them to death. I just cannot imagine the sheer terror. I mean, emergency services raced over and they were having to smash windows to try and get any of them out. This was such an impossible task, bless them. The fire was raging on for 7 hours before they could actually extinguish it. Over 400 people were killed and 300 were injured. And the owners of the supermarket, plus the security guard who'd obviously locked everybody in on their orders, did face a trial, but the controversy was far from over. The first verdict was an absolute joke. They got about 5 years, I believe, and people were understandably fuming. There was uproar, there was riots, there was fighting, and eventually the court had to change their mind. They changed the decision and gave them longer sentences, I believe around 10 to 12 years. But surprise, surprise, they just got released early. It's so corrupt.
This 2-year-old was kidnapped and tortured by two 10-year-old boys. His name was James. He was at a shopping center with his mom. She looked away for 1 second, and when she looked back, he was gone. Panicked and called for help. Security was searching everywhere, but they couldn't find him. They checked CCTV footage, and turned out it wasn't an adult perpetrator. It was 2 little boys. Robert and John were seen holding James's hands while leading him away from the mall. They took him to a secluded railway track, and there they tortured him. They threw paint in his eyes. They hit him with bricks, metal bars, stones, over and over again until he died. And then they left his little body on the train tracks where it was cut in half by a train. He was 2 years old. He did not deserve that. 2 days later, James's body was found mutilated in half with multiple fractures on his skull, bruising in his face, and cuts on his lip. And the worst part is that somebody actually saw James walking with the boys. He was crying a lot, but they assumed that maybe that was their little brother. And on top of that, those same boys had tried to abduct another toddler earlier that day. But the boy's mom immediately noticed and she screamed at them, and I just wish that James was that lucky. Both boys were arrested and convicted of murder, and they became the youngest convicted murderers in modern British history. They were sentenced to indefinite detention, and to this day, I just don't know how.
She was already raging with her husband for leaving her for this lad's trip. Then he was like, I need to tell you a secret, but in order to tell you this secret, you need to get in the car with me and drive to the creepy woods. It was the late 70s in Denver in Colorado. Jeanette Hill had got married to Vincent Groves. Now, he was apparently a very respectable guy. He worked as an electrician, and to everybody around the neighborhood, he just seemed like a normal guy. Growing up, he'd been this incredible athlete. People from his childhood liked him, but he was hiding the darkest secret of all. The pair had met at the end of the 70s and they got married pretty soon after that. And honestly, this is what puts me off getting married, because you truly never know who you are getting married to. So Vincent started secretly and not so secretly towards the end taking substances. He began treating Jeanette really badly, shouting at her, being really aggressive and violent towards her, but she never really realised what he was truly capable of until August 1981. So he'd planned this guy's camping trip and she was raging because he never invited her. They'd only been married for 5 months and she kind of felt in her mind that they should still be in that kind of honeymoon phase. She was like, why are you wanting to bugger off for the weekend without me? And to make matters worse, he was not only taking 2 friends, but he was also going with a 17-year-old girl. This was Tammy Woodrum, and obviously his wife was raging, like, why are you going away with a young girl? But he didn't care what his wife said. He went on the trip, and when he came back, he was acting very odd. He was like, I need to tell you something about this trip. You need to get in the car with me and we need to drive to the woods. So she goes, which I feel is wild. I would have been like, no, tell me here and now. So they drove there, and as soon as they parked up, he started bawling his eyes out like she'd never seen before. She was like, oh my God, what is he going to admit to here? He said that when they were on the camping trip, they'd been taking substances, and they'd been taking substances with Tammy. He said something had gone wrong, she'd taken too much, and she died. But it gets worse. Her body was still in the truck. So obviously the wife said the right thing. She was like, you need to hand yourself into police ASAP. So he did that. And he told them the exact same tale. They took the body away, did the autopsy, but something wasn't quite adding up. Tammy's body told an entirely different story. She had in fact not died from substances. In fact, she didn't even have substances in her system. She'd been beaten, and strangled to death. Just imagine this poor wife's shock. But that wasn't all, because not only had her husband now been exposed as being an rapist and a murderer, but he'd done it before. Now, she only actually found out the true extent of this way later. He only got 12 years in prison for this brutal killing, which is wild to me. Jeanette decided she didn't need this man in her life. She divorced him, so well done, Jeanette. But when he was released, he decided to take another victim. He very much started taking more and more substances and becoming more involved in the substance world and the S-work world. In 1987, he met an S-worker called Sheila Washington. Now, she was just 20 years old. He clearly had this thing for younger women. The pair got together one night in a motel. He was buying S off her, and everything started totally normal until he tried to strangle her to death. Now, thankfully, his plan was ruined because other guests heard the commotion and ran out to see what the hell was going on. He fled the scene, he ran away, he got in a car and drove off. But eyewitnesses were able to describe what he looked like and what the car was like. Suddenly, all of Vincent's dirty secrets started to unravel. In fact, he became a suspect in 20 murders. These were all young girls that had been strangled in the area. It turned out there were a bunch of young girls that he used to hang out with or he'd been known to be associates of that just all of a sudden disappeared or wound up dead. And I don't know how he got away with what he did for so long, but ultimately he was only convicted of 3 murders. But after he'd eventually died in prison of like health-related issues, he was linked to way more. The FBI believe he may have been responsible for 20 murders. And all I'm saying is this poor woman who married him, Jeanette Hill, she thought she'd met the love of her life. So when you single girls are being pressured into getting married by your families, please kindly send them this.
She brings her teenage daughter on this luxurious, expensive vacation, and the entire time her teenage daughter is planning her murder. Heather Mack was truly born into like the most charmed life possible. She had wealthy parents that doted on her, a big beautiful home, lavish vacations, and was truly given like the best of the best. Life certainly changed when Heather was 10 and her father passed away. Now she was really angry and violent, and she would take it out mostly on her mother Sheila. While Heather was in high school, her mother Sheila called the police on her daughter 86 times for pushing her, hitting her, punching her, biting her, stealing thousands of dollars from her, and then running away like a countless amount of times. A lot of the fights between the mother and the daughter stemmed from Heather's relationship with her boyfriend, Tommy, who was a unemployed college dropout wannabe rapper. Sheila definitely did not think that Tommy was good enough for her daughter. She thought he was a loser.
Around this time, Heather was described by her own friends as the sweetest person one second and then a vicious monster the next. Heather and her mother Sheila truly had a toxic relationship. It was up and down. Both of them claimed that the other one was abusive, but then they would go on these like really expensive, lavish vacations to these beautiful destinations where they would wear matching outfits and laugh and truly have a ball. It's so confusing. When Heather was 19, her relationship with her mother was at an all-time low. So as a last-ditch effort to kind of rebuild the relationship, Sheila planned this really luxurious, lavish, very expensive mother-daughter vacation to Bali. The two of them flew first class and were staying at a 5-star luxury resort called the St. Regis. But while Sheila was planning this beautiful, expensive vacation for her and her daughter, her teenage daughter was planning her murder. Heather and Sheila are now on this luxurious, expensive vacation in Bali, and while they're there, Heather goes into her mom's purse and steals Sheila's credit card. And with that, she bought her boyfriend Tommy a $12,000 first-class plane ticket to Bali and then a really expensive hotel suite in the resort that they were staying at. And when Tommy, who Sheila already really did not like and did not want near her daughter at all, shows up at the resort on their one-on-one mother-daughter vacation, it obviously angered Sheila a lot, but she could never imagine why Tommy was really there, which was to end her life. Heather and Tommy planned all of this out through text messages. They said that they were Bonnie and Clyde, criminal masterminds, and were really excited to be rich once Sheila was gone and Heather inherited all of her money. One night on the vacation, Tommy snuck into their hotel room with a decorative fruit bowl that he used to bludgeon Sheila to death, while Sheila's teenage daughter Heather covered her mouth with her hand, which I'm sure was so terrifying. And the entire time, 19-year-old Heather is killing her mom. She was a few weeks pregnant with Tommy's baby. Tommy and Heather then stuffed Sheila's body in a suitcase, wheeled it out of the resort, called a taxi, and then put the suitcase, which had Sheila's body in it, in the trunk of the taxi. Then they told the taxi driver that they had to go back into the resort really quick to check out, and then they fled, leaving the suitcase that had her mother's body still in the trunk of the taxi. The taxi guy is obviously so confused, but he goes and gets the luggage out of his cab, and that's when he realizes that it's dripping blood. Oh my God, could you even imagine the horror? So he turned that in to the police, and that's where it was discovered that Sheila was inside. Their main suspects, Heather and Tommy, who are criminal masterminds, according to them, were arrested the very next day at a nearby motel. They used Sheila's credit card to book this motel room and checked in under their real names. And they would have to serve their prison sentence in Indonesia together at one of the worst prisons in the entire country. Tommy was sentenced to only 18 years in prison for murdering Sheila, and Heather was only sentenced to 10 years in prison. While awaiting trial, she gave birth to their daughter that she named Stella, and I've never heard of this before, but Heather was allowed to keep Sheila and raise her in prison. In this really not great looking prison. She was allowed to keep a newborn baby until she was 2 years old. Not only that, Heather had a really easygoing time in prison. She partied, she drank, she smoked, she slept with other inmates. She had access to a cell phone, so she would post on social media, she would post on YouTube, and was even allowed day trips where she would go out to restaurants with her daughter, just not being punished at all. 7 years into Heather's 10-year sentence, which is already not a lot, she was released early on good behavior, partying and drinking is good behavior, whatever. Heather really wanted to stay in Indonesia because honestly, she was having a good time there. She wanted to stay there and raise her daughter Stella, but her and her daughter Stella were immediately deported back to the United States, where Heather was arrested again in the United States on conspiracy and obstruction charges and is currently serving a 28-year sentence. Her daughter Stella, who I feel so terrible for, she was bounced around so many times, raised for the first couple years in a prison, bounced bounced by countries, and different people had her in their custody. She's currently, in the custody of a family friend, but a lot of people that want custody of Stella are using it for not great reasons. They want to write a book or a movie on this case. So I feel so terrible for her, and I truly, truly hope that whoever has custody of Stella now is doing it with the right reasons and she's being well taken care of. Heather Mack has gotten so much leniency, I think, because of her wealth, her age, her gender, and her beauty. She is a beautiful girl, and I do not sugarcoat this at all, she scares me. She terrifies me. I think she's a danger to society, and it's terrifying that one day she will be released. I truly think that she is a sociopath who has never shown remorse for her mother, who, I don't think her mother Sheila was a perfect person, but she did not deserve that at all. It must have been really, really scary. And the fact that she's never been punished, never showed any remorse, and she will be released one day and probably get custody of even her child once she's released, terrifies me. But let me know what you think in the comments, because I know you guys are going to have some crazy opinions about Heather Mack.
This case is one of Brazil's most infamous murders. She fell in love with a star athlete, had his baby, and then she was murdered, and her remains were fed to dogs. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the murder of Elisa Samujo. Elisa was the type of girl where no one had a bad word to say about her. She didn't have a bad bone in her body. Growing up, she was described as a dreamer. She had big dreams and high aspirations for herself, specifically in the world of sport. Elisa loved to kick a ball about. She loved playing football in the street with her friends, and she was always the goalkeeper. She was fearless and would throw herself all over to make some pretty amazing saves. She was a really talented goalkeeper, and she was hopeful she would be able to do this as a career, something that she loved. And so at only 18 years old, she left home to go and follow her dreams. She would move to a different part of Brazil where she found it quite difficult to break out in the sporting industry. Liza was very beautiful, and so she got the odd modelling job here and there. However, for the couple of years that she was in this part of Brazil, she supported herself by doing sex work. This wasn't an industry that she wanted to be in or intended to stay in, and so eventually she once again packed up and made the move over to Rio de Janeiro. It would be here that she met Bruno Fernandes de Souza. Like Eliza, Bruno came from quite a troubled and poor background. Where they're from, people didn't make it big. However, what got Bruno through this was his love for football. He put everything into that, and he was described as an exceptional athlete. He would go on to play for the Brazilian football team Flamengo. He was their goalkeeper, and he was also their captain, and Bruno was absolutely idolised by the fans. All of this praise and attention was something that Bruno thrived off. But all of this resulted in a change in Bruno. He started to become someone that his inner circle didn't recognise. He would go wild at parties, going at it for days on end. He would cheat on his wife, who had been with him since they had nothing. She had been with him from the start. At one point in time, he had another 7 girlfriends and also another fiancée. Elisa and Bruno met at a barbecue. The pair of them shared sporting interests, and so of course they ended up having some mutual friends. Right off the bat, the attraction was there for both of them, but it was Bruno that pursued Elisa. They clicked and began to see each other more often, going out for dinner, and soon they began a sexual relationship. Things seemed to be going very well between the two of them until Elisa revealed to Bruno that she was pregnant. He would completely deny that this baby was his, and kind of starting from here, he became very verbally and physically abusive and threatening towards Elisa. He told her that she was going to have an abortion, but she refused. She wasn't. In October 2009, Bruno and a couple of his friends lured Elisa to somewhere where they physically restrained her and forced her to take some tablets in the hopes that this would bring on a miscarriage. She reported this to the police and also told them that the men had beaten her up and also held a gun to her head, but nothing was done. She applied for a restraining order against Bruno, but once again, nothing was done, and that was denied. After this, he would threaten her, saying, quote, "If you go to the police or anywhere else, I'll come after you. I'll kill you. I'll kill your family and friends because I know where they all live. I know every single one of them. When Bruno started to ignore Eliza, stopped answering her phone calls in regards to the baby, she decided that she was going to go to the press, who vilified her. Journalists painted Eliza as a gold digger, someone who had baby trapped Bruno, getting pregnant by him on purpose so that she could be famous or that she could get lots of money. They said that she was crazy and a psycho, and when they asked Bruno during an interview about her abuse allegations, he responded, bear in mind, this is on International Women's Day, quote, "Who hasn't laid hands on a woman?" Eliza did everything that she could to get help and to bring awareness to what was happening to her, but every single time she was ignored, knocked back and laughed at. Eliza gave birth to a baby boy who she named Bruno. However, she would never be able to watch him grow up. After the frenzy of the media and the whole of Brazil and all of Bruno's supporters turning on Eliza and hating on her, she decided that she was going to leave Rio de Janeiro. She did. She left and told only a handful of people where she was going. She had to do that for her safety. Bruno, however, was able to eventually track her down, and when he got in touch with her, he sold her the dream. He appeared to have had a change of heart. He told Eliza that he was sorry. He was sorry for what had happened. He regretted it. He wanted to be in baby Bruno's life. He was willing to take a DNA test to say that baby Bruno was his baby. He was going to pay for them. He was going to put them up in a lovely apartment where they would live as a happy family. Like so many abusers are able to do, Bruno manipulated Eliza, earning her trust and lured her back to Rio de Janeiro. She arrived in Rio on the 4th of June, and she and baby Bruno were supposed to be going to watch Bruno at some football match, but when the Range Rover arrived to pick her up, she got in the car and quickly realised that that wasn't what was going to happen. Inside of the Range Rover were two of Bruno's friends. A total of 9 or 10 people were involved in this case, but I'm not going to name all of them because it will get really confusing because there are so many of them. So Eliza is in the car with these two men when they start arguing. One of the men taking a gun and whacking Eliza over the head with it with so much force that she started to bleed, all while she is holding her 4-month-old son. She would have her bag taken away from her that her phone was inside, and she and baby Bruno would be driven almost 280 miles away to a ranch that Bruno owned. Here, she and baby Bruno were held for days. Some witnesses, including Bruno's wife at the time, claimed that Eliza wasn't there against her own will. She wasn't being held captive. She was allowed to get up and go, roam around as she pleased, and that they were all just hanging out. But others described witnessing Eliza being beaten, assaulted, and her screams being concealed with loud pounding music. Over the couple of days that Eliza and the baby were in this house, Bruno held many parties where lots of people came and went, but none of them helped Eliza. According to his wife, she was free to go whenever she wanted, but she had her bag with her purse and her phone taken away from her, so if she did want to go, where was she going to go? She had been driven hundreds of miles away. What exactly happened to Eliza days later was detailed in court by Bruno's nephew George, who witnessed the entire thing. He alleged that following instructions from Bruno, Eliza and baby Bruno were forced into a car to be driven away to their deaths. They were driven to the house of another perpetrator. Eliza was dragged out of the car, having to leave her son behind. She was forced into the house where in one room sat only a chair and a piece of rope. She was forced into the chair and restrained. She looked up to one of the perpetrators, a man named Makachow, and pleaded with him, begging him to please not beat her again, to which he responded, quote, "I'm not going to beat you. I'm going to kill you." Makachow then wrapped his arm around Eliza's neck in a headlock position and strangled her to death. George then stated that Eliza was dismembered and some of her dismembered remains were fed to the Rottweiler dogs, while others were placed into concrete and hidden within the walls of the house. Bruno Fernandes de Souza, along with 9 other perpetrators, would be arrested in connection with the kidnapping and murder of Eliza and the kidnapping of baby Bruno. Baby Bruno was thankfully found alive and well, and custody of him was awarded to Eliza's mother. Eliza and her remains, however, have never been recovered. It took years in court before Bruno took any sort of responsibility and finally admitted that Eliza was dead. Up until this point, he had been playing a charade that she had left. He said that she had left the baby with him for only 7 days while she went back to Sao Paulo because she had to pay off some debt, and she promised Bruno that she would be back for the baby and then never returned. That is the story that he claimed was truth for years. Makachow, who pinned all of the blame on Bruno, stating that it was him that ordered the murder of Eliza, was sentenced to only 12 years imprisonment, and Bruno would be sentenced to only 22 years imprisonment in 2013. In 2017, he was briefly released and reincarcerated, and in 2019, he was released for good. Only weeks after being released, after being convicted of kidnapping, torturing, and murdering his ex-partner, Bruno was signed to a new football team and was able to carry on his career. He is still active on Instagram right now, and his bio says, quote, "Imagine a new story for your life and believe it."
Ew, and now I'm just like thinking about it again. It is so nasty. This 13-year-old boy vanished after finding his father's disturbing secret. Dylan Redwine is the youngest son of Elaine and Mark. They were married for 18 years before calling it a quits, and it was a messy, messy divorce. Dylan's parents were now hundreds of miles away from each other, which Dylan did not mind. He moved with his mom, and he liked the separation from his dad because, honestly, his dad is pretty shitty. If you know, you know. But Mark still had visitation rights, so over Thanksgiving break, Dylan would be getting on a flight and be spending it with his father. Dylan was adamant. He was begging his mom, please don't make me go, especially since his older brother Cody would not be joining him, so it would just be him and his father that he didn't really like anymore alone. But it was a court order. There really wasn't anything that they could do. So Dylan got on that flight and went to visit his father, and within hours, 13-year-old Dylan Redwine would be missing. The day that Dylan got to his father's house, he immediately asked to go sleep over at another friend's house, and when his father said no, he made plans to go hang out with his friend at 6:30 in the morning the following day. So it's clear that this poor child was desperate to just get away from his father. But unfortunately, Dylan would never make it to those plans with his friend. In the morning, his father, Mark, claims that he woke up around 7 a.m. His son, Dylan, was still sleeping on the couch, so he left to go run some errands, and when he got back around 11 a.m., his son was gone. One of his fishing poles was missing, along with Dylan's phone and book bag. Nickelodeon was still playing on the TV, and the front door was wide open. A little while later, Mark called his ex-wife to say that he had lost their son. Dylan was reported missing as a possible runaway. But Dylan's mom knew that Dylan did not just run away, and she actually suspected her ex-husband Mark from day one, and there were a lot of red flags. For one thing, Dylan did not like to fish. He did not know how to fish, so it did not make sense to his mother that he would bring a fishing pole if he did not even know how to run a fishing line through it. Also, Dylan did not watch Nickelodeon anymore, so why would it be on the TV? Dylan was 13. He hadn't watched Nickelodeon for years at this point. It was apparent that his father did not even know enough about his son to come up with convincing lies. Also, like most teenagers, Dylan was attached to his phone, and there was no phone activity from Dylan since the night before he went missing. Months after Dylan vanished, the entire family went on an episode of Dr. Phil. You can still find it on YouTube if you want. It was pretty interesting to watch, and the fingers were definitely being pointed at Mark. So Dr. Phil offered him a lie detector right there on the episode to try and clear his name, and Mark refused to take it. The man that was there to give him the polygraph test said it was the first time he ever had a parent with a missing child refuse to take a polygraph test, which I think says a lot. There were no leads, and the case was going cold until remains were found in a wooden area near Dylan's father's home. 13-year-old Dylan Redwine had been killed. Trace amounts of Dylan's blood was found all over his father's living room. It was believed that that is where Dylan lost his life and then was dismembered by his own father. I'm sure at this point you guys are all wondering if there's a motive. Why would his father do this to him? And believe me, there's a motive, and you guys are not going to believe what it is. It's a lot more dark and disturbing and disgusting than you could ever imagine. Mark was finally arrested for killing his own son years after Dylan first went missing, and when he was arrested, his trial was postponed 10 times, which, was really hard for Dylan's mother. I mean, having the trial postponed once is really hard for loved ones of a victim, let alone 10 times. But Mark was eventually found guilty of all charges and sentenced to the maximum sentence of 48 years in prison, which will be a life sentence for Mark Redwine, who is now in his 60s. So why did Mark take his child's life? I don't think you guys are ready for this, honestly. Well, turns out, shortly before Dylan first went missing, his older brother Cody confronted their father about some really disturbing images that Dylan had found on their father's computer. These photos showed Mark wearing makeup in women's lingerie, wearing a diaper, and eating out of the diaper. I'm not even kidding. I wish I was. And these photos are online if you guys want to look at them, but I highly suggest you not looking at them because they are grosser than you could even imagine. Now I'm thinking about it again. Ew, they're so nasty. Please don't Google them. I know you guys will because I always tell you not to look at photos and then you guys do anyways. Please don't. They're so gross. But they are online if you want to, I guess. Allegedly, Dylan was disgusted when he found these photos of his father. He took photos of them on his phone and showed his older brother the photos. It is believed that Dylan, the day that he passed away, confronted his father about these photos, possibly, maybe exposed them because he had them on his phone, which is also could explain why Dylan's phone to this day has never been found. It is believed that Mark, who already had a really violent past, went into a rage over this and took it out on his poor child. To this day, though, he maintains his innocence and even claims that the photos are photoshopped. Like, okay, buddy.
One night, you're at your pregnant girlfriend's apartment. The next night, you're at the hospital where your wife is giving birth to your third child together. Imagine that. The Stoughton Police Explorers Academy was a youth program run by the Stoughton Police Department in Massachusetts. It was part of the larger Law Enforcement Exploring Initiative, which are programs designed to introduce young people, typically ages between 14 and 20, to careers in law enforcement. This program involves hands-on training and mentorship programs from local police officers, and the kids or the young adults participate in doing things such as ride-alongs with police officers, training drills, mock crime scene investigations, community service, etc. And in March of 2010, 13-year-old Sandra Birchmore applied to join this program. Sandra Birchmore was born and raised in Massachusetts. She was raised by her single mother, Denise, with the help of her grandmother. As a child, she was the kind of little girl that was open to talking to anyone. A very happy girl, always in good spirits, but those kind of people that always want to chat and love to overshare about anything and everything. That was Sandra, and that was one of the parts that her family and friends loved the most about her. In her childhood, Sandra lacked a father figure. Her biological father wasn't in the picture, and she sadly lost her stepfather when she was pretty young. When she first applied to the program, she was put on a waiting list, but eventually she was accepted into the program that spring. It didn't take long for that program to become a central part of her world. It gave her structure, a sense of belonging, and a regular guidance from officers who led the sessions, one of those being Matthew Farwell. Matthew Farwell was a sworn police officer, but his connection to the Explorers program went way back. He was part of the program himself when he was a teenager, and now he was still active, but this time as an instructor alongside of his identical twin brother, William. Both him and his brother worked under the supervision of Officer Devine, who was the person who ran the entire program. Sandra was very excited about this opportunity. It had been something that she was looking forward to, and very quickly she began looking at Matthew, William, and Robert as great mentors who she trusted. But sadly, what Sandra thought would be a promising mentorship with a positive impact turned out to be a living nightmare. In October of 2012, 26-year-old Matthew Farwell sent 15-year-old Sandra a friend request on Facebook. It was a seemingly innocent gesture, but in reality, it was the first step of a grooming process that would go on for years. At only 15 years old, Sandra found herself tied into a very messy, very physical relationship with Matthew Farwell, who, while grooming Sandra, was maintaining his facade as a respected police officer and a community leader. Matthew was also, at the same time, planning his wedding with his fiancée, Michelle. Despite her relationship with Matthew and the major power, Sandra remained in the Explorers program, and her family was under the impression that the program was impacting Sandra in a very positive way. In 2014, her mother expressed gratitude to the program for what it had done for Sandra, and Sandra remained in the program until she graduated high school in 2015. But just because the program ended, it didn't mean that her relationship with Matthew was ending. Sandra went on to move out of her family home. She got her own apartment and started working a job at a middle school. And as the years passed, her secret relationship with Matthew continued. In 2020, Sandra got news that would change her life. She found out that she was pregnant, and the baby's father married police officer Matthew Farwell. Sandra could not be happier about the news. In her eyes, this was incredible news. She was over the moon, and she couldn't wait to become a mom. But when Matthew found out, his reaction was the complete opposite. This was his biggest nightmare. He was married, his wife was pregnant with their third child, not to mention he was a police officer who had previously mentored Sandra when he first met her when she was 13 years old. When Matthew found out, the two of them got in a very heated argument, and the argument ended with Matthew looking at Sandra and saying, quote, "I wish you would unalive yourself," end quote. But listen, this part is weird because we later find out that when Sandra found out that Matthew's wife was pregnant, she was so angry she was going to tell his wife that Matthew had been cheating on her. But Sandra made an agreement with Matthew, and she basically said, "I will not tell your wife if you get me pregnant. I want a baby, and in return, you can keep me a secret." And Matthew agreed. So why he was so angry when the two of them literally planned this out together, I don't understand, and it's beyond me. In the following days and weeks, Sandra confided in some of her coworkers about the relationship issues that she was facing. She wanted so badly to celebrate this big milestone in her life. She wanted to be happy and excited and all the things, but the baby's father was busy trying to console his wife who was about to give birth, and he was working after hours trying to do everything in his power to keep the relationship that he had with Sandra a secret. Sandra told her coworker and family members as well that her boyfriend was a married Stoughton police officer and that he had told her to get rid of the baby. But in that specific conversation with her coworker, she ended the conversation by saying, "If anything happens to me, Matthew is the person to blame." February 4th of 2021 was a Thursday. By that point, Sandra had already missed several days of work, and none of her coworkers had heard from her. They were concerned, they were worried, so they called for a wellness check. As soon as police officers arrived to conduct the wellness check, little alarm bells started ringing in their heads because Sandra's car was covered in snow, meaning it looked as if she had not left her apartment for days. And when they were finally able to enter her apartment, what they saw was horrific. Sandra's lifeless body was in her bedroom. She was leaning up against a door. There was a black duffel bag strap tied to the closet door. The other end of it was tied tightly around her neck. 23-year-old Sandra Birchmore was 10 weeks pregnant when she passed, and her official cause of death was ruled an unaliving. Her family was left devastated and confused. They were heartbroken, but also couldn't make sense of the idea that Sandra would do this to herself because she had so much to look forward to, and she had told all of them how excited she was to become a mom, so it didn't make sense that she would do this to herself. But that was what the cause of death was. However, as investigators dug deeper, a far more disturbing reality began to surface, one that suggested Sandra had been taken advantage of by someone who she was supposed to trust, someone who should have been protecting her, and security camera footage from her apartment building revealed that a man was seen entering her apartment that Monday, February 1st. We later find out the last text Sandra ever sent was that Monday night. A man texted her asking if he could come over. Sandra let him know that she would leave the door unlocked for him. And at 9:14 p.m., he showed up. He was not there for long. He was only there for 29 minutes. Surveillance cameras caught him walking out at 9:43 p.m. That man was Detective Matthew Farwell, the Stoughton police officer who had maintained a secret and toxic power imbalance relationship with Sandra for years. What emerged was a grim portrait of manipulation and grooming rooted in a culture of misconduct that ran disturbingly deep within the Stoughton Police Department, and it didn't start nor end with Sandra. The community was left stunned, and those closest to Sandra were forced to confront a horrifying truth. She had been groomed, she had been controlled, and ultimately betrayed by someone in a position of power. In her final weeks of life, we know that Sandra confided in friends, some coworkers, and family as well that Matthew had been awful to her. He was primarily awful to her during heated conversations about the pregnancy, but that wasn't the only red flag. When investigators searched Matthew's iCloud account, they uncovered deeply troubling images that hinted at a long-standing obsession with violence against women. Then came the lies. When Sandra's family informed the police chief of her relationship with Matthew, an internal investigation began and he was brought in for questioning.
And when Matthew sat down with Massachusetts State Police detectives, he spun a web of lies and deception. He claimed his relationship with Sandra had only began in 2020, but records show that it started much earlier, back in 2013 when Sandra was only 15 years old. He tried to minimize the relationship, of course, insisting that they had only been intimate a couple of times in the last year, but text messages told a different story, documenting at least 10 encounters throughout the last year. He even lied about the last time that he saw her. Initially, his story was that he last saw her in October of 2020, but phone records and messages revealed that he had visited her apartment just days before she passed. He had asked Sandra for a key. He had been there, and now he was trying to disappear and remove himself from the narrative. Eventually, Matthew admitted that the last time that he saw Sandra was that night on February 1st. The story that he was sticking to was that he went to her apartment to end their relationship. He claimed they had, quote, a pretty nasty argument, and said that he left around 9:30 p.m. Sandra passed in February. On April 1st of 2022, Matthew Farwell resigned from his position. Not long after, he resigned from the police department completely. 2 months after Sandra's passing, Robert Devine was interviewed. Remember, he was the guy that ran the Explorers program, the RAN that oversaw everything. He denied that he had any kind of relationship with Sandra and said he had not been in contact with her at all after she left the program. Lie. Sandra's social media accounts showed that she had been in contact through Facebook Messenger with an account using a fake name. Allegedly, the messages were so graphic and disturbing, they were not allowed to be released to the public. And Sandra wasn't the only young girl that this account was messaging, but the person behind that account, 47-year-old Robert Devine. Not long after that interview, but before his secondary interview, Robert resigned from the police department. Right after him was William, Matthew's twin brother. He was the last of the three to resign from the police department. After receiving no clear answers and with a medical examiner having ruled Sandra Birchmore's death an unaliving, Sandra's family filed a lawsuit for wrongful death against Matthew Farwell, William Farwell, and Robert Devine. The complaint also included claims of negligent supervision, negligent retention, pain and suffering, and emotional distress. It alleged that their actions were part of a prolonged pattern of grooming and misconduct that ultimately contributed to Sandra's tragic passing on February 4th of 2021. They also sued the entire police department. Sandra's family and friends, her loved ones, did not believe that Sandra passed away by unaliving. They were sure that Matthew Farwell ended her life when he was there that night and framed it to look like an unaliving to cover up his relationship with her and the fact that she was pregnant. To try and back their claims, they hired a former chief medical examiner of New York City who agreed with them that the manner of death was homicide by strangulation. Later on, an FBI forensic doctor would also review the autopsy and conclude that her injuries were not injuries that could have been done if she did this to herself. It was his opinion as well that the manner of death was homicide. On August 28th of 2024, former Stoughton detective Matthew Farwell was federally indicted, accused of ending Sandra's life to silence her and staging her death as an unaliving. After that, a lot more details were released as far as the text conversations between him and Sandra, and they were, I could throw up. I'm not going to read them because they're that bad, but Matthew clearly had a fetish for younger girls. He had a thing for role-playing and often wanted her to act younger than she was, wanted her to act like she didn't want it, if you know what I mean. He wanted her to act like he was forcing her, if you're catching my drift. At times, he wanted her to act like a little sister, and he wanted to play the role of an older brother. He wanted to pretend to be breaking into her house and have her act surprised. Gross, disgusting, ew. They also did what they did a lot of times while he was on duty and at times inside of his patrol car. I don't know, dude. The text that he sends literally makes me ill. We also find out that when Sandra told her friends that Matthew asked for a key to her apartment, he requested a key apparently, and then spent time walking around her apartment looking very specifically at the closet and the closet doors, which may not seem crazy, but knowing what we know now and how she passed away, that to me shows clear signs of premeditation. He asked for a key to have access to her place, and then he was literally scoping out the exact area where he was planning to end her life. Today, Matthew Farwell is currently in federal custody, held without bond in a pre-trial detention status. In other words, he is incarcerated at a federal detention center and will remain there until his trial. His next court appearance is currently scheduled for July 1st of 2025. And that's where we are now. Sandra Birchmore was only 23 years old. She was a new mom-to-be, a young woman who trusted the wrong people in positions of power who, instead of protecting her, manipulated her, isolated her, and then ended her life. Luckily, because of all the people who loved Sandra and wanted to fight for her, the FBI stepped in and demanded answers. And while the state still clings to their version of events, the truth is finally beginning to surface. This case makes me sweat. I'm angry. I'm for sure gonna stay updated on this case. Let me know if any of you guys are also keeping track of this, because it is legit insanity. But that is all I have for today's case. Thank you guys for spending time with me today and for listening to Sandra's story. Episode 5 of the podcast also just went live, so go listen to that if you haven't already. It's on the Black Dahlia. It's a crazy one. But yeah, hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.
This 5-year-old girl was tortured and forced to lick urine by her own mom and her mom's boyfriend. Her name was Mercedes, and she was living with her grandparents and her older sister Georgia. But her mother claimed that she needed to be disciplined because she was a bad child. So she took custody of them and moved in with her boyfriend Jose, hoping that he could teach her daughter a lesson. Jose locked Mercedes in his car and forced her to hold 2 heavy jugs for a very long time. Like, you can hear it on video. She's crying and begging to know what she did wrong. But Jose and Katrina literally screamed at her to keep them up. Days later, Katrina notices that Mercedes had bruises on her face and cuts on her thighs, but instead of stopping the abuse, she joins in with them. And that's when things escalated, because Jose started beating her, sometimes with his hands or just random objects around the house. He even slapped her so hard that her teeth came out. Like, how is that discipline? It got to the point where the abuse wasn't even humane. This vile creature forced this innocent girl to eat dog feces, and one time she accidentally peed herself and he made her clean it up with her tongue. And what did her mom do? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Mercedes' sister, who saw everything, told the police. My mom would step on her feet and Jose would stab her with thumbtacks. That's so horrible. Her grandmother tried calling CPS multiple times, but we already know how that went. And sadly, by February 7th, Mercedes just couldn't take it anymore. Her body literally shut down on itself. And then her mom had the audacity to rush her to the ER, yelling, "Please save my baby." No, you did this. Like, you let them kill her. Mercedes arrived to the ER bruised from head to toe. I mean, she had a fractured skull, patches of hair completely ripped out, 2 toenails missing from her left foot. It was just a long list of brutal torture that this little girl endured for 3 weeks straight. Both Jose and Katrina were immediately arrested, with Jose getting life in prison and Katrina only getting 45 years, but honestly, they should have just offed both their heads. I just still don't get how.
You heard the crowd first. Tens of thousands of voices screaming, cheering, singing, and at the center of it all, Travis Scott. Travis Scott, a Houston-born artist who turned his music into a brand and his brand into a full-blown spectacle called Astroworld. Astroworld Festival came to life in 2018, and when Travis first created it, it was more than just a concert. It was meant to be an experience. Fast forward to November 5th of 2021, the 3rd installment of the festival, and the first following what happened in the world in 2020. 2021's festival was supposed to be bigger, louder. It was sold out almost immediately. 50,000 people crammed into Houston's NRG Park, ready for an unforgettable night. The lineup had names such as SZA, Lil Baby, Don Toliver. And the general vibe of Astroworld was intense. It was high energy, it was chaotic, and it was meant to be, because Travis Scott is known for his rager culture. Does he not call himself the Rage King or something like that? His concerts are wild, and they're meant to be wild and unpredictable. It feels like excitement teetering on the edge of danger. The people in the crowd, they mosh, they rage, they rush, and Travis wants that. He encourages it, he likes it, because it's part of his brand. But what started as a night of celebration in November of 2021 would end in chaos, confusion, and tragedy. People went for the music, and some of them never came back home. November 5th, 2021 was a Friday. The night Astroworld Festival was finally returning to Houston post-2020. The minute tickets dropped months ago, they had sold out within the hour. Over 100,000 people were expected to show up across the weekend, a literal city of fans, some flying in from across the country just to see Travis Scott. The plan was to allow 70,000 people for night 1. Because the festival was originally supposed to be 2 nights back-to-back, back, but that number was reduced to 50,000 in the days leading up to the concert. However, allegedly around 5,000 people managed to sneak into the concert without tickets. The city of Houston and Harris County were involved in organizing security. More than 500 security staff and police officers were on site. I think the actual number was estimated to be around 530 police officers, more than double the amount who worked the 2019 festival. The concert organizers had 2 lengthy emergency plan documents prepared, one focused on dealing with the overall response to emergencies such as extreme weather conditions and the other one dealing with medical response. There was a main medical tent with 2 emergency room physicians, 6 registered nurses, 2 paramedics, and 9 emergency medical technicians. There were 30 cots, 12 tables, and 2 wheelchairs. The other smaller medical tents were positioned throughout the event. Outside of the venue, the Houston Fire Department had around 20 ambulances parked and ready in anticipation that they would be needed, although reportedly 62 ambulances in all would eventually respond to the event that night. But even with the preparations, concerns about the staff to guest ratio was a conversation that started weeks before the night of the concert. At around 3 to 5 a.m. in the early hours of the morning outside of NRG Park, fans were already lining up. At around 10 a.m., people began running in. Not walking, they were running. Running through the entrance, breaking through gates and pulling down barricades, knocking down metal detectors, and trampling all over each other with so much force. By 8:42 p.m., SZA had ended her performance at the second stage and Travis Scott was set to start at the main stage at 9 p.m. So the crowd rushed from the second stage to the first quickly and with so much force that people were pushing each other trying to get to the front. But even before Travis was supposed to start at night, even before SZA was finished with her set, medical attention needed was already completely out of control. Serious medical problems had gotten out of hand well before 8 p.m. Even before 4 p.m., medics had already seen and treated at least 54 patients. Some of the staff, some of the people there had already worked in Astroworld Festival before, so some kind of knew what to expect because it was a Travis Scott concert, but no one could have really imagined just how bad things would get. By 8:15 p.m., the medical staff on site were unable to keep track and document patients because there were already so many people who needed help. It was said that people in the crowd were unconscious, and even after they were already passed out and had been down for a while, some were not seen until 20 minutes after the fact because medical personnel literally could not keep track. There was a clock on stage counting down the seconds until 9 p.m. waiting for Travis to come on stage, and by that point, the crowd was packed in full. People were compressed up against each other, pushing forward and backward with no room to move. The crowd was only getting tighter and tighter by the second, making it hard to breathe. By the time that Travis came out to perform his first song, people in the crowd were already seeing others passing out around them and losing consciousness right in front of their eyes. You could not move in that crowd, not to put your arms up to try and get a breath of fresh air, not to walk out, try to walk out of the crowd, not to move spots and trade with the person next to you to try and help them if they were having a hard time breathing. You literally could not move. One of the fans in the crowd remembers thinking to herself, whatever you do, do not fall down because you will not be able to get back up again. People started to panic, realizing that there was absolutely no getting out of there even if you wanted to. By 9:07 p.m., the first 911 call was received referencing to distress in the crowd. Around 9:24 p.m., Travis paused his music when he saw an ambulance trying to get across the crowd. He was saying, quote, "Somebody passed out right here," towards the front of the stage. It took more than 10 minutes for emergency services to even reach or see the person that they were trying to get to. And during that pause in the show, allegedly 2 staff members went up to Travis on stage and whispered something to him. In response, Travis looked at the crowd and said, quote, "Y'all know what you came to do," before the music started back up again. And Travis Scott told the tens of thousands of fans in front of him to, quote, "make the ground shake." By 9:38 p.m., the event was declared a mass casualty event. From every direction, people in the crowd had their arms raised, voices were cracking. You can hear the panic in their voice. In the videos that have been posted of people yelling for help at the top of their lungs, some were crying, others were pleading, yelling things such as, "Stop the show, people are passing away," and they were not exaggerating. In the thick of it, fans were lifting unconscious bodies above their heads, trying to pass them over safely over the barricades. Others were performing CPR on the ground ground right in the middle of the chaos, and that is if they could get to the ground to see the person that was passed out to begin with. EMTs were overwhelmed, treating multiple victims at once, trying to move through a crowd that wouldn't or couldn't make way for them. One girl climbed onto a camera platform begging the cameraman to do something. She screamed that people were literally losing their lives in front of her eyes. The cameraman did not respond. Another fan climbed up on stage to get Travis's attention. The videos of that night show it all. Dozens of voices, faces twisted in fear, but nobody listened. And this is why I'm making this video, because the videos of Astroworld are all over my For You page, and it makes me sick. It's so heartbreaking to listen to. Around 9:35 p.m., a graduate assistant who was also a trained firefighter and an EMT was in the crowd when he came across a 22-year-old woman. Her skin had turned grayish blue. She had no pulse. He dropped to the ground and started CPR, directing another person to breathe air into her lungs. By 9:42 p.m., 2 medics finally reached them. At first, the guy helping was relieved until he realized that they had no oxygen bags, no defibrillator. They told him that they had run out. He watched in disbelief as one of the medics' chest compressions were completely ineffective, while the other one tried to use a backboard without any straps, mind you. They propped the girl up on a fence, and as they moved, the girl's limp body slid off the board and struck to the ground head first. She lost her life a few days later in the hospital. At 9:43 p.m., another victim's attorney confirmed that their client had been photographed inside of a medical tent, and you could see that her face was disfigured from being stepped on and trampled over by so many people in the crowd. She too would not survive. By the end of the night, 8 people were confirmed deceased, either on site or shortly after arrival at local hospitals. 2 additional victims passed away in the days that followed due to critical injuries. The people who tragically lost their lives were 21-year-old Axel Acosta. He was a computer science major at Western Washington University. It was his first ever music festival. He had just turned 21 and had saved up enough money to go to Astroworld. He traveled to Houston to attend the concert all by himself. His father said he was shy, gentle, and full of potential. 27-year-old Danish Beg. He was a devoted older brother who passed trying to protect his fiancée from being crushed. He had just recently gotten engaged, and in a caption his brother wrote, quote, "You saved a life by giving your life. You put your fiancé first and then yourself. You saved her. I hope you know that. I can't believe this, and I just wish that we didn't get separated. I'm in so much pain, brother. I wish I could have at least held you or talked to you. I'm all over the place, but no, you are never going to be forgotten. You have made such an impact in your short life." 14-year-old John Hilgert. He was a freshman at Memorial High School. He played football, loved sports, and was known for being kind and respectful. His mother described him as the sweetest and smartest young man. He was the youngest person to pass that night until Ezra. 9-year-old Ezra Blount. Ezra was the youngest victim. He was from Dallas and attended the festival with his father. They were separated in the crowd after his father passed out with Ezra still on his shoulders. Ezra was trampled and placed into a medically induced coma. He fought for days but passed away on November 14th, 2021. 22-year-old Barty Shahani. She was a senior at Texas A&M studying electronics system engineering. She had her whole life ahead of her. After being critically injured in the crowd, she was placed on a ventilator. She passed away on November 10th, just days before she was expected to graduate. 21-year-old Franco Patino. He was a University of Dayton student majoring in mechanical engineering. He was attending the festival with his best friend, Jacob, who also lost his life. Franco has been described as being the kind of guy who always wanted to help somebody. 20-year-old Jacob Juranek. He was a junior at Southern Illinois University studying art and media. He was celebrating his upcoming 21st birthday with his best friend Franco. He was creative, funny, and deeply loved by all of his family and friends. 23-year-old Rudy Pena. He was an inspiring model and a criminal justice major from Laredo, Texas. He traveled to Houston with his friends to see Travis Scott live. His family described him as generous, humble, and always putting others before himself. His sister Jennifer has said he was, quote, there for everybody. He loved to be close to his family and friends. He helped a lot. He was always smiling, end quote. 23-year-old Madison Dubisky. She was a vibrant, outgoing, beautiful girl from Houston, Texas, who loved fashion, her dog, and her family. She attended the festival with her younger brother, who was separated from her during the surge. Her friends remember her as joyful, bold, and full of life. And 16-year-old Brianna Rodriguez. Brianna Brianna was a beautiful high school student from Houston with a passion for dance. Her family described her as full of life, always smiling, and the kind of person who lit up every room she walked into. According to Travis Scott, he was not aware of what was happening in the crowd. He also claims that he never heard any of the fans crying out for help. Whether you believe that is true or not is up to you, but in my personal opinion, I find it really hard to believe that he didn't see what was happening right before his eyes. Because yeah, it was loud, yeah, there were bright lights on, but it wasn't one person or two or three or 10 or 20. It was so many people trying in so many different ways to get his attention, crawling on stage, begging him to stop the music so the crowd could separate. The show was cut early. Apparently someone notified Travis Scott that his set would be cut short, but did not specify why. But the event was declared a mass casualty event at 9:38 p.m. However, the show did not stop until closer to 10:15 p.m. By 2:13 a.m., officials had set up a reunification center for missing persons at the Wyndham Houston Hotel, trying to figure out who the victims were and starting to look for contact information for their loved ones. At around 6 a.m., Astroworld released its first public statement offering condolences and announcing that the second show of the festival that was supposed to be the night after had been canceled. Travis Scott also posted a video offering his condolences for the families. 2 days later, a makeshift memorial appeared along a fence near the festival grounds. People left behind flowers, candles, and photos and other tributes. A nonprofit from San Antonio even brought therapy dogs to comfort grieving attendees. In the days that followed, public tributes continued, but the aftermath of Astroworld was not just headlines and hashtags. It was parents standing over hospital beds. It was shoes left in the muddy fields. It was siblings waiting for texts that would never come. For the families of those victims, life split into a before and after. Some had to identify their children from photos taken inside of those medical tents. Others found out through news reports or social media. Funerals were held in hometowns across the country: Houston, Dallas, Laredo, Chicago, and each one of them echoed the same question: how could this happen? Lawsuits piled up, hundreds of them, accusing Travis Scott, Live Nation, and security teams of negligence. Investigations were launched, the FBI got involved, but the trauma that lingers in survivors and in families of all the victims will stick with them forever. Some have said that they still cannot listen to music without hearing screams. There were 10 wrongful death lawsuits filed for the 10 victims. All of them have been resolved through confidential statements. When this all came out, I remember the public was divided. Some were pointing fingers at the artists, others were blaming the people in the crowd. Videos circulating of Travis continuing his set while fans were begging for help were going all around social media. But a lot of people had the same feeling. They felt that no one was listening, not before, not during, not after. The city of Houston promised a change, saying their safety protocols would be reviewed to make sure something like this never happens again. But for the victims' families, it almost felt like too little too late. Astroworld was supposed to be a celebration where music met magic. Instead, it became a living nightmare for so many people, too many people. I've been seeing so many new videos of Astroworld out, and it sinks my heart, and I wanted to make this video to spread awareness but also to remember the victims. It's so terrible. But that is all I have for today's video. Thank you guys if you stuck to the very end of it for listening to this video. I love you guys so much. I hope you're having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.
A Wisconsin teacher who continuously sexually assaulted one of her students was just released from jail into the public. Anyone living in Wisconsin who has kids should listen to this story because it's bad. So this is 24-year-old Madison Lynn Bergman. Madison began teaching at Rivercrest Elementary School in Wisconsin in the fall of 2022. But last week she was arrested after a dad found alarming texts between his son and his 5th grade teacher, Miss Bergman. The victim is an 11-year-old boy, and he obviously has not been publicly identified because he's underage. In the text between the two, Madison told him how much she enjoyed him touching her and making out with him at school. In one text to the boy, Madison said, quote, "I want to just grab your face, push you to the floor, and make out with you." End quote. In another text, she said, quote, "I almost kissed you when you were on the ground today, but I got distracted by your stomach." End quote. These texts were discovered after the boy's mom overheard him and Madison talking on the phone on April 29th. After she found out, she emailed the teacher and asked her to stop contacting the boy outside of school. And then she gave her son's phone to his dad. His dad then found the text messages, printed them off, and stormed into the school, which prompted the school to contact authorities. During the investigation, police found a folder in Madison's purse with the boy's name on it. And inside the folder were handwritten notes talking about how much they kissed. In one letter, Madison wrote, quote, "One of my cousins is in the 5th grade, and I can't imagine a man talking to her how we talk. I know we have a special relationship and I do love you more than anyone in the world, but I have to be the adult here and stop. According to reports, Madison goes into detail in the letter saying how much the boy turns her on and how she's obsessed with him. Authorities then found a letter in the boy's desk for Madison that said, quote, "I love you so much it hurts." End quote. So obviously Madison was arrested, and when questioned about everything, she told police that she had a close relationship with the boy's family, and she said that she got his cell phone number back in December when the boy's family invited her to go skiing with them over winter break. She said the reason she got his cell phone number was just as a precaution in case they got separated at the park. But according to the boy, he said he texted his teacher almost daily ever since that trip. The boy also told authorities that they had kissed several times in the classroom since March, and Madison would often sit next to him during independent reading time and touch his thigh. Madison has since been charged with 1 count of first-degree child sexual assault. But what's absolutely outrageous is that she was just released from the St. Croix County Jail back into the public on a $25,000 bond. And to make matters worse is that it was a $25,000 signature bond, meaning she was released without actually having to pay anything. Her next court date is set for May 30th, and she's since been put on unpaid administrative leave. In the meantime, she's not allowed on school property or at school events, and she can't be in contact with the students, their parents, or staff at the school, as well as anyone under 18. Madison was also just about to get married in July, but because of all of this, her fiance has called off the wedding. The fact that she's just walking free in the public right now is sickening to me. If you're in the community and have kids, just be careful.
This is the story of Carmen and Clarence Jenkins. One Sunday morning while Clarence and Carmen was attending church service, they met a young lady who was down on her luck named Grace Davis. Grace had just left her husband. She had no income or a place to stay, which resulted into her having to give up her 2 children. But luckily, her auntie decided to temporarily keep them. Carmen and Clarence opened up their home to Grace with free room and board. The only thing she had to do was watch their children while she was at work, and she agreed. And the plan was smooth until Clarence went to jail for 90 days. While Clarence is in jail, Carmen and Grace are getting close. The two get so close they started So when those 90 days were up, they were pissed when Clarence came home. The two actually fell in love within those 3 months. You know how a lesbian relationship go. When Clarence got out of jail, Carmen thought he was going to be mad about her relationship with Grace, but he's actually thrilled. He wants the 3 of them to be a throuple, and Grace agrees just to stay close to Carmen. The 3-way relationship was good for the first couple months until Clarence started to be so controlling that he would lock the girls in the house. He did not want them to go anywhere, and if they did go somewhere, he wanted to know where they were going. But surprisingly, that ain't what ran Grace away. If Clarence locked them in the house, Grace said, "At least I was locked in the house with my boo." But as time go by, Grace is missing her children. She tried to get them back since she had a place to stay now, but the caseworker was like, "Nah, we don't like this living situation you got going on. You're gonna have to go somewhere more stable." So that's what Grace did. Grace had to leave the throuple just so she can get her children back. Clarence is pissed, so pissed that he decided to come up with a plan to scare Grace back into their 3-way relationship. On April 6, 2008, Clarence goes to a staffing agency where he frequents for odd jobs. That's where he sees Miko Harris. Miko was always at the staff agency as well, looking for work. She was also known to have a drug problem. Witnesses that also used to frequent the agency said they used to see Miko sitting on Clarence's lap. They also said they used to see the two kissing. They also seen them go to the bathroom a couple times. So it's safe to say Clarence was messing with Miko every time he would go up to that staff agency looking for jobs. But on April 6, 2008, Clarence went up to the agency disguised as a police officer. He put Miko in handcuffs and said he could keep her out of jail if she helped him with something. And he took her back to his house. Once they got back to the house, Clarence tied Miko to a chair and told Carmen to strangle her with the extension cord. Carmen tried, but she couldn't succeed. That's when Clarence grabbed the bag and put it around her head, then tied the extension cord around her neck. Once Miko was deceased, the two drug her into the bathroom and started dismembering her. They cut off her feet and her hands. They took the remainder of Miko's body to a remote field outside of Greenville and burnt it. Then they took one hand and one foot, put it in a plastic bag, and set it on Grace's mother's porch. Then they took Miko's other hand and foot and put it on Grace's auntie's porch. 2 separate houses. Both bags had a letter attached to them demanding money and demanding for Grace to come back, with the email attached for her to get in contact with them. Grace's mother and auntie contacted the police about the bag and the letter on the porch, but neither one of them have talked to Grace. So now they thinking that these are Grace's body parts in these bags. A couple days go by and the forensics comes back that these are Miko's body parts. And they like, how is this even connected? Grace's mother and aunt like, we don't know no Miko. Mind y'all, they still don't even know where Grace is at. Almost a week go by, police finally get a tip that Grace is at a friend's house outside of Greenville. And when they went over to that friend's house, Grace answers the door. She like, what's going on? The police like, do you know Miko Harris? She like, no Miko. They like, well, her body parts was at your mama house and your auntie house. So she confused. She don't know what's going on. So the police really didn't have nothing to go on but that email address. So they decided to check the IP, and it went back to the Greenville library. They go there to check the cameras, and guess who they see? Carmen and Clarence were on the library camera every day checking that email to see if Grace had wrote back. All along, Grace didn't even know none of this was even going on. The police got a search warrant for their house, and when they went in there, mind y'all, it's been a whole week later, and they found blood in the tub, blood spatter on the wall. Y'all didn't want to clean that up? April 11th, 2008, the two were arrested. Clarence blamed everything on Carmen, and Carmen actually held him down for an entire year until she said, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and tell y'all everything. And they actually gave her a plea bargain if she showed them where Mikhail's body was. She cooperated and they got Mikhail's remains. She testified against her husband, and you know what? The jury believed her. She said she was forced in this crime. The detectives found vows written by Clarence to Grace confessing his undenying love for her. He sounded quite obsessed. March 2012, Clarence was sentenced to life and Carmen was sentenced to 40 years. It was 50 years, but it reduced to 40 years. Now, my question to y'all think she should have got life?